So I was very young when I went to university. I started when I was 16. And when I was in my earlier years, like in high school, playing high school football when I was 13, which is really young and I'm really not that big. And so when I was in that realm, I started to take a lot of hits because I was a running back. And I started to develop, of all things, non-structural pain. I started to develop intractable asthma, breathing difficulties. And my parents, because I was still of that age, took me to the pediatrician, Dr. Briggs. And Dr. Briggs looked at me and said, oh, you know, the good news is that you're just around 14 and asthma seems to go in 7-year cycles. So if, well, you know, maybe not. You might have to live with this till you're 21. This was medicine at its finest, okay? You know, looking at some bizarre chart. And interestingly, at the same time, chiropractors in my home city of Winnipeg, chiropractors were actually doing spinal assessments looking for scoliosis as a public health process, which is pretty cool when you think of it, because we don't even do that now. But in that era and in that time, I got a slip that said, your spine shows a little bit of propensity towards scoliosis. So I was taken by my parents at the ripe old age of this 14 to my first chiropractic adjustment, or at least session. They took a full spine, and Dr. Obi Baisley, and that's an important name you'll want to remember, looked at me and said, yes, you do have a curvature in your spine. We're going to adjust you so that you can have a straighter spine, vertebral, on the subluxation continuum here. At that era, you didn't have to go with your parents to visits or anything else. So my parents would put me on a bus. I'd go to get my adjustments, and I lasted about 6 visits. It was horrible. I didn't understand what I was there for or anything else. And I liked the guy, but it didn't make any difference. And I couldn't see how my spine was going to get straighter. And I wanted to just play football anyways. And so I went back to Dr. Briggs, and he gave me this god-awful nebulizer that just about would knock your socks off. And I'd take this, and I hated having asthma, but I hated taking the drugs even worse. And I started to get sicker and sicker and sicker. And you know how those intersectional moments happen in your life of where you go, wait a minute, something has to break here. So my Uncle Bill, a dairy farmer north of Winnipeg, sees my father, whose name is Charlie, and we're up there for Sunday dinner, and says, Charlie, for God's sake, take that boy to a chiropractor, because I'm struggling with my breathing at the Sunday dinner. And my father looks at him and said, well, we took him to one. He's working with this straight spine. And so they take me back to Dr. Obi Baisley. And instead of looking at me through this lens of the vertebral side of the equation, he looks at me through the lens of the subluxation. And get this, Obi was trained by BJ himself. And the fact that he didn't do it over here was that he had corrupted the relationship between vertebral and subluxation. And so I started to get adjusted instead of manipulated, and my world changed. And my world changed because the secret, I would say, logic of vertebral and subluxation had been put back to coherence. He didn't wave a magic wand. He didn't give me a supplement. He didn't do anything. He went to my spine to understand where there was obstruction in the nervous system, and he began to adjust me so that my body could reorganize. He didn't hit me at T4 because T4 has a direct connection to my breathing apparatus. He adjusted me to create better tone in my entire nervous system. You see, the NeuroAge, as we're talking about it right now, isn't something new. In fact, in 1906, in the later years after Dede was putting together the whole dialogue of what chiropractic was, he actually stopped the engines going about racking vertebrae into their right place. And he looked at BJ and he said, my son, it's about the tone within the nervous system. And in 1906, the whole premise of the NeuroAge was inculcated into every aspect of what was the philosophy, the science, and the art of the chiropractic adjustment. And so tonality that associates with function is where I've spent the second part of my life in chiropractic. I graduated, as you will, coming out of your chiropractic career in the academic side, and I felt like I was so proud to be a chiropractor, but that I had merely scratched the surface of what was possible to do or learn as a chiropractor. I knew there was another level of academia I wanted to explore, so I got to, take my fellowship in sports sciences, sports performance. And I wasn't interested, nothing against taping ankles or anything like that, but I wasn't at all interested in taping ankles. I'd had the experience of being adjusted through my subluxations to allow my body and my humanness to perform. And as a consequence of that, I was striving to fill this bucket of knowledge to try and understand what I could gain in talent to learn more about it. So I listened not only to chiropractors, but I listened to incredible Olympians, and I listened to incredible athletic therapists and orthopedic surgeons, and I gained as much as I could, but I never deviated from the fact that I am a chiropractor, because there's too many athletic therapists, there's too many orthopedic surgeons that are taking care of the vertebral side of the equation, and there are no one, or at least it wasn't at that time, taking care of the subluxation part of the equation. And so my life started to change, that I started to adjust performing athletes, performing artists, and I got to be well known within different communities. But my passion was to look at the person in front of me like I was, that 14-year-old child, that baby that was just born, the newborns that were there, and apply the principles for it. And I want you to hear this, is that the moment I made the coherence happen between vertebral and subluxation, my practice exploded. There was nothing that could hold you back. You can have it all if you just bring it together. If you happen to understand the genius of structure, and what you happen to know is that the genius of communication allows the expression of potential. And we, unlike any of the other healthcare professions, the ones that are regulated and registered, have this opportunity to do it all and stay on path for who we are.